because they never succeed. They just end up burning me. Hey y'all, it's Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today. And for this video, we're going to be doing a very low-key September wrap-up. Alright, so before you get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments what is the most forgettable book that you read in September, the one that like you're already struggling to remember what actually happened in that book. Let's talk about it. So hello! Can you believe it is officially the best month of the year? I'm so excited. Things have been a little crazy around here lately, which means for today and for this wrap up, I figured I would be nice to myself and I made myself a nice little cup of tea. We are gonna be so low key in filming this. I did not put on makeup. I didn't do a lot of effort when it came to my setup today. This will be fun. So diving right on in to my wrap up for the month, I mentioned in my weekly reading vlog, which I'll link in the cards up above, that I was attempting to do a 30 and 30, as in, you know, there are 30 days in September. I tried to read a book a day, or what equivalated to a book a day. Yeah, we fell off of that. Unfortunately, I hit a point where I got a lot of like mid and mediocre books back to back to back to back. I DNF'd 5 books this month. Something just was not working for me and it demolished all of my reading mojo, and I kind of have been slowly struggling my way out of a slump since about midway through September. Along with that, work was kind of stressful. I planned a party. Things were a little crazy around here. It's a shame. Maybe one day I will try again to do this 30 and 30 and perhaps actually succeed, but it didn't happen this time. So starting into my stats, I read 17 books this month, and across those I read 5,046 pages, which is a lot. It's not my highest for the year, but it's the second highest actually. Pretty solid. That does include converting audiobook hours, 2 pages, but in regard to audiobook hours, almost 82 hours. That is also a lot. My average rating for the month was 3.97 stars, which honestly, this looks like I had a fairly decent reading month, but as I said, I also unfortunately DNF'd 5 books. Then onto my genre stats, I did kind of stay around the same genres for the most part. I read 1 fantasy and then 5 horror, 3 manga, 1 nonfiction, 4 romance, 1 romantasy, and then 2 sci-fi. Off those, when it comes to the little goals I keep for myself, I did obviously read a manga, I did read a nonfiction book, and I did read a book that was more than 450 pages, so really good on all of those. And then my series stats, I started into 1 new series, but I read 7 continuations. I didn't finish any series though, but I did make the decision I would not be continuing on with 1. Lastly, of those 22 books altogether, is that mathing? Of those 22 books, all the ones I rated and the ones I did not, I read 9 from my owned TBR, which is really great. So we really were off to such a strong start until that slump hit me. So as per usual, in my wrap-ups, I only talk about books that I have not reviewed in some other dedicated video. I did do a lot of reading for dedicated videos this month though. So if you want early access to my thoughts on those, I did film a attempted 30 and 30 reading vlog for my Patreon. I'll have a link to that in the description down below if you're interested. My Nerds tier is getting early access to my thoughts on all of the books I read or attempted to read this month. But I also have a few other reading vlogs that came out this month with thoughts. I had 2 different ARC reading vlogs. I also had a racing to finish my horror bingo. And kind of along with that, I did also have a wrap up of my horror bingo as well. On that note, let's officially dive into the reviews. I'm going to go through these, I guess, let's say lowest to highest rated. So starting at the top, unfortunately, the book that I did not finish and can talk to y'all about is Not in My Book by Katie Holt, which was my Geek Squad pick for the month. So this was the book club pick on my Patreon, and clearly it did not go great. I was kind of excited going into this because I had heard it compared to Beach Read, one of my favorite romance books, but the last book I read that compared to Beach Read did not go well. So reminiscent of Beach Read, we are following 2 writers. However, these 2 are in an MFA program and they are definitely butting heads the entire time. We have Aiden, who writes like very highbrow literature, and then we have Rosie, who wants to write romance novels, and they get into arguments and disagreements nearly every single class, to the point where it finally is too much for the professor. She puts her foot down, threatens to kick them out of the class unless they work together on their final project. So naturally it has to have some sort of a love story so that it will work for Rosie's side, but it can't end in a happily ever after for Aiden's side. So again, it's a love story. It's not a romance necessarily. And we do get occasional excerpts of the book they were working on together. And pretty quickly I realized this was essentially them writing fan fiction of their own relationship. That's a little odd, I'm not gonna lie, but what made it worse was the fact that they would then have to share this to their class for revision. And I literally cannot picture anything more uncomfortable. Like, why would you do that? That's so weird. That feels like nightmare fuel. I mean, like being forced to read your diary from when you were like 12 in front of a group of people you respect, and just like, that wasn't my only issue though. I also felt like the way these two picked at each other was rather immature, honestly. They were supposed to be 26, 2 years younger than me, and I just like cannot fathom pulling pigtails and like nitpicking and being so immature, especially when you're forced to work together. Like, I am petty, but Rosie and Aiden like took it to a new level. I also just did not really find Aiden to be a hero that I felt like would win me over in the story. He honestly just came across kind of like an asshole. I didn't feel like there was anything redeeming about him. I really did want to try and push through this, but unfortunately it was one of the last books, like right at the point where I realized I was in this reading slump and just came to the decision, I'm not going to push myself through it. Like, I am already in this slump. That's just going to make it worse. So I officially gave up. Very, very sad about that. But I do think this book has brought me to the decision that I need to steer clear of romances that are compared to beach read, because they never succeed. They just end up burning me. Next one is Library Wars Volume 13 by Kiiro Yumi. I've been working on this series for quite some time now, but we are set in a world where there's a breakdown of government between those that protect libraries and those that are pushing for censorship. It is a very timely topic right now, and we are following Kashahara, who is a member of the library task force and is trying to fight against censorship, but also has a developing romance with her instructor Dojo. I am really continuing to like this series overall. I do think it's a lot of fun, and as the story continues, we got a lot more in depth into the discussions around censorship and like some of the complicated situations that can come up, but how free speech is always tied into the conversation. And though I was very much here for the plot when it came to those elements, there's this weird side romance that I have not liked since it was introduced, and it is the main focus for an issue of this volume, and that pretty immediately brought down my investment in the story and my enjoyment of this volume overall. Unfortunately, this one was about 3.5 stars. After that is A Legend of Baking by Jamie Wesley. This is the sequel to her Sugar Blitz series. I read the first one, it's been a while, but this was also for my Buns and Roses TBR jar challenge. I'll put a link to the playlist up above if you haven't heard about it. So I knew I was going to be continuing the series, and I was rather excited because this one is kind of a second chance romance, but with brother's best friend. At the start, we are following Sloane, who unfortunately gets passed over for a promotion she knew she deserved and ends up quitting her job. She ends up going to her brother Donovan's cupcakery. He and his best friends all play on a professional football team, but in the off season, they run this little bakery called Sugar Blitz. She ends up agreeing to help Donovan out with their social media, but that gets more complicated because August, the best friend who she has had a crush on since she was in high school, recently went viral for going on this tangent against these guys who are being really misogynistic and just rude to the owners and some of the customers. And that does sort of force the two of them to spend time together. I really enjoyed the setup of the story, and I liked the tropes that were involved in the romance, but dear Lord, I felt like there were too many side plots in this, unfortunately, that sort of detracted from my enjoyment when it came to the actual romance itself. And though in second chance romances, I do tend to enjoy a flashback scenario where we get to see, you know, the two of them interacting the first time around. In this one, I actually wasn't a big fan of it because of the circumstances around why things didn't work out between them in the past timeline. I'm trying to be as vague as possible so I don't give spoilers, but I just wasn't really a big fan of that. All in all though, the actual romance itself was pretty cute. There was a little bit of spice in here as well, which I did enjoy. And then I do also really just enjoy the cupcakery setting. Honestly, I think it's a lot of fun. And having these big scary football players be the ones that own it and run it is just adorable in my opinion. I really enjoyed August, the hero here. I mean, super sweet, strong, silent type. And then Sloane is very much a take charge, take no BS kind of lady. I really enjoyed her too. So the dynamic between them was a lot of fun. Like I said, Overall, I enjoyed this. I just wish there had been a little bit of editing around those side plots, but it did turn out to be like a 3.75 star. One book that I randomly picked up when I was trying to work on my 30 and 30 was Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This one has been hanging out on my TBR for a really long time. SMG is one of my instant interest authors. Maybe I won't necessarily buy her books, but pretty immediately, just by having her name on it, I am going to add it to my TBR. This one is from her backlist, and it is set in Mexico City. Initially, we are following Domingo, who is a street kid and ends up becoming friends with 𝗖cie, this woman who is actually a vampire from an Aztec clan, and she is actually on the run from a different group of vampires that are more reminiscent of like a gang. And then we also see from he's called a Renfield, so like an assistant to these vampires from that gang, who is also trying to hunt her down, but keep these vampire princes in line. I mean, SMG's writing style just appeals to me instantly. I really like how she builds out her characters. I feel like her atmosphere work is always impeccable. It draws you into the story so well. This one, the biggest winner for me though, was the world building, especially around these vampires. I thought it was so interesting how she made these little elements to differentiate them and signify like where they came from, and how that is showcased in the different abilities they have and how they are represented. Having their Renfields, I thought that was kind of fun. It actually kind of made me think of like the Saga of Darren Shan series that I read when I was in middle school, so I really appreciated that. Honestly, I just kind of wish there was a little bit more focus on the plot, like we would have expanded upon it a little bit more, because it felt like at times things were kind of dragging. It was slow moving to actually make any progress. Oh, actually, there's also the perspective of this woman who is a cop, and she is also trying to, find these vampires because she knows they're responsible for all the drama that's happening in the city right now. And like, that's kind of part of my issue, was I don't really feel like the cop's perspective, even like the Renfield guy's perspective, was really necessary. I was much more interested in 𝗖cie and Domingo's perspectives and like watching this relationship play out between the two of them. I wouldn't necessarily call it romantic, but like it has romantic elements. It was very interesting to see how it was evolving from when they first meet, the end of the story when things are really starting to go crazy. I did like this, but again, it wasn't my favorite. I don't really know if I would necessarily reread this one in comparison to some of this author's other work. This one was also like a 3.75 star, very low 4-star, right around that range. I'll go ahead and just talk about these two together. It is volumes 11 and 12 of Library Wars by Kiiro Yumi. These two do really focus on the censorship angle. There's an author who is specifically being threatened by I think it's called like the Media Betterment Committee, and the task force has to try and protect him, as well as obviously stand up for what they believe in. I really liked how all of that plot was playing out here. Plus, there are some really cute and funny moments around the romance in the 11th volume. Whereas if I'm being honest, the 12th one, the plot line did hold my attention, but it's the side romance with main character's best friend and then her partner that really stole the show for me. I have been wondering if something was actually developing between those two for so long, and to see it play out here, I loved it. I was so here for it. It was so good. Both of these are 4 stars. Next one is my nonfiction book. So I finally got around to reading The Art Thief by Michael Finkel. This is following this man who is kind of renowned as the world's most famous art thief, or most successful art thief. I don't know what adjective you want to put in there. This man stole so many pieces, but it wasn't really to sell them. It was for his own enjoyment and his own collection, which was really interesting to kind of watch the story unfold. I think Finkel did a really great job of honestly making this a very cinematic story. At times while listening to the audiobook, it really did feel like I was instead watching a true crime documentary. I also appreciated diving into the thief's like psychology. I mean, it was kind of interesting to see how he had this draw to steal these items, but wasn't doing so for monetary gain, and he wasn't like bragging about it to people. It was a perspective I hadn't really seen before when it comes to a thief. Really would have liked to expand upon that a little bit more. Overall, I really think if this was just a little bit longer, if we had maybe expanded upon certain elements of the story and the crimes, I would have enjoyed it more. But all in all, still a really solid read. Very strong 4-star. I am planning to actually give this one to my dad because I think he'd really enjoy it. Next is actually the first book that I read in September, and it was this little horror novella that I listened to on audio with Josh called The Bell Chime by Mona Kabbani. And I think Jan talked about this one a while back, and that's how it ended up on my TBR. But we're following this woman who at the start is leaving her apartment and ends up finding a missing poster with her own face on it. And the way it evolves from there is kind of wild. It took me a little bit because it's broken down into these different parts, and initially they do seem so separate, and then eventually you kind of see how they work together. They like play around with timeline and the story and like what you think is happening versus what's actually happening. This kind of made me feel like a horror play on Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which I thought was really interesting. I really liked the writing itself, especially because in the sections between the parts, there would actually be a narrator sort of like speaking to us and being like, okay, well, we're gonna leave things here, but next let me tell you about this person or this friend. And so I liked that element of it. It felt like it dragged me into the story a little bit more, but also the way she described just certain items or objects. Like, it's so hard to get into this without being too specific because of spoilers. I mean, it's a novella, so I don't want to give you too much. The writing around certain elements was just like so unsettling and creepy and gross, and just like immediately like made me shiver and feel like there was something under my skin, and I just, ugh. It was creepy, but I really, really liked it. This was a really strong 4 stars. And then lastly is also a different horror novella, one I've been meaning to get around to for so long. Sour Candy by Kealan Patrick Burke. This one, I mean, the cover of it has been intriguing for forever, but also just like the title, I was so interested about like, how did Sour Candy play into this like Appalachian creature on the cover? But this one follows a man who at the start is going to the grocery store and ends up seeing this mom and her child who is just throwing a total temper tantrum. And he has kind of a weird interaction with the kid. And then unfortunately for him, on his way home, he gets in a car accident by this woman. And once the police arrive, they tell him that they've sent somebody to take care of his son, but he doesn't have a son. And things evolve from there. And I mean, this was a wild time. It was really psychological. Like I said, it kind of has this like Appalachian cosmic eldritch horror elements at different times, which part of me still isn't 100% sure what it is that I read and like what was happening there, but it was weird and it was wild and it was horrific, so I liked it. The gaslighting, and it's not even quite gaslighting, but how that works in the story was truly so horrifying. I mean, this book was really creepy. Kids, you know? The true horror. I did feel like how this one ended and wrapped up, I kind of have an issue with, just because it doesn't feel like it 100% makes sense with some of the answers we had gotten previously. But even still, another really strong 4-star horror novella. I really gotta pick these up more because I feel like horror novellas just always hit. They just always give me exactly what I want. And so on that note, sadly, I don't have any 5 stars for y'all today. So that's officially it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, let's go ahead and leave a cup of tea emoji in the comments. I have links to all my socials, as well as a few ways you can support me down in the description. I come out videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!